Before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you that while Caitlin and Sophia are dietitians, we're not your dietitians. This means the information shared in the Food Freedom Fertility podcast is intended to entertain, educate, and inform. It is not a substitute for medical care. This information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes. Welcome to another episode of Food, Freedom, and Fertility. We are your hosts, Sophia, Pavia, and Caitlin Johnson, both registered dietitian nutritionists, both specializing in women's health and fertility. And we are here today with the woman, the legend. She was the maid of honor at my wedding, Sarah Jeltema, one of my longest running friendships. And she is here today to talk just sort of about her life and experience. I made her come on this show. Sarah is a proud introvert, and so this is not her thing, but she's here because she has a lot of cool life experiences and has been through things and done things that I think that you, our audience, would be interested in and relate to, and maybe are going through something very similar yourselves. She did a big career switch, which we'll get into, but right now she is, oh my gosh, I made her say this. So you are the president of the Women Who Whisky in San Diego?
Yeah, so I run an Instagram called Whisky Nomad, no E in whiskey, where I educate people on whiskey. And then I'm also the president of the San Diego chapter of Women Who Whisky. So like a social club for women whiskey drinkers here in San Diego. And then I am also the executive director of the First Responder Whiskey Society, which is a nonprofit that donates proceeds to fallen first responder families.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So she works in the world of whiskey.
Yay.
As well as, and you have like a certification, don't you? You like got a certification recently. What was that?
It's a CSS certification similar to the WSET. It's basically a proctored exam where they test your knowledge of spirits. Very rigorous exam, and you can do different levels. So I'm a certified specialist of spirits, CSS level 1.
Interesting.
So you might be like, why do you have this booze hound? No, not really.
On our fertility podcast.
Who specializes in like alcohol and such on your podcast. And so we're going to dive into it. Sarah, thank you for being here with us and for relenting to my harassment to come on our show. So Sarah has lived a lot of life in her short 38 years. She is a former police department employee who worked nights for 11 years?
Yeah, a long time. Yeah. I rotated shifts for 13 years, but I was a solid night shift person for about four or five.
So let's start there. So You were working for San Diego Police Department, which was very challenging. And then the pandemic happened, and then it became even more crazy. So can you just share with us sort of like the beginning of your career there, sort of how things were changing, your roles that were changing, and sort of how things were moving through your career? I think that would be helpful.
So I was fresh out of college. I was a political science major, and I wanted to change the world in DC, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And my whole family ended up in San Diego due to some military and family connections. So I ended up applying for what I thought was the fire department. And the testing process is the same. I ended up getting picked up by the police department. My first day on the job, I was like, yeah, I get to like deliver babies and like instruct in CPR. And then I was like, wait, what? Wait, what? What are we doing? But it takes so long, so much background, so much testing to even get into that job in the first place that by the time I got in there, I was like, all right, I'm going to commit to this for like a solid year or two, see kind of where I end up. And I sort of thought it was like a cool temporary job when I first started. And then it ended up being my career for 13 years, which I'm sure some other people can relate, that you sort of end up doing something and don't really know how to get out of it or like it enough to not have it be changed, especially when it's as solid a job as government work. So I started as a 911 operator, talking to the citizens of San Diego and listening to them. And after about 1.5 years of hearing all of the things you hear in that job, I started to become very angry. I became a very angry person. As in, like, somebody would cut me off on the road, which happens, it makes all of us
Just
angry.
happens in life. Yeah.
Yeah. Or somebody went like the grocery store, like, oh, those people in the grocery store who are just taking up the whole aisle and they're like really slow.
Oh, we do.
Oh, I know that
Maybe
person.
I'm still angry. But like, there's a natural anger, like an annoyance, and then there's like an irrational, like, hatred.
Rage.
And I just got so mad. I would get so angry because in my mind, everybody was lying and all this evil was in the world and I couldn't unsee it. And so I decided to promote to a radio job where I talked to the officers instead of the civilians. And it became more of a team environment. Like I'm, coordinating robbery pursuits and, coordinating the SWAT team and like handling these calls that come in, but talking to the officers. And I got a lot more like, hey, thanks for your help. We really needed you. It was definitely a harder job as it's like a video game. You have like you have a certain amount of resources, never enough in the police department. You have a bunch of calls and all of these priorities and these kind of things that need to be solved. And you need to figure out how to solve these problems with your finite resources. And so it's a lot of Jenga and like thinking about things in memory. And I really enjoyed that strategicness part of the radio job. But after a while, the shift work definitely got to me. And
what were your shifts like?
I was on this. So I actually promoted to radio right when the city went on a hiring freeze that lasted a couple years. And so I was the lowest on the totem pole in seniority for about 3 years in radio, which is, like 75 dispatchers in the department. And so I was stuck on night shift. I could not get off of it. I didn't have enough seniority to get off of it. And that's
sort of how your shifts are based.
Yeah. So the worst night shift that they had was midnight to 10, which is quite possibly the worst thing in the world. I think I slept like 4 to 5 hours a night for like 3 years, if that. Terrible sleep. Because like anybody who is like a night person, like, oh, I'm a night person, like I would thrive in a night shift. Like, yeah, you're a night person up till like 4 a.m, maybe 3, 4 a.m. Like, have you ever stayed up all night with a baby or anything? Like, you do okay till like 2. You're like tired. You do okay till like 3. But like once the sun starts coming up, like everybody's dying. And that was only halfway through my shift. That was like, I still had 6 hours to go. So, and then the circadian rhythm and the way light works and the way your body works, like by the time 10 a.m. comes around, there's full construction outside, there's traffic, there's people in the world. And so the light is fully in the sky. So your brain goes, okay, well, I guess we didn't sleep last night. Like we'll just dump a bunch of adrenaline into your body and we'll keep you awake all day. And I didn't really,
your cortisol. Yeah.
I was like kind of a hippie back then. I didn't believe in like any sort of medicine. Like I wouldn't take sleeping pills because I didn't want to like become addicted to them and have that affect my body. And so I was like trying to be really stubborn for years about doing like cherry juice. Like maybe that will help me sleep and things that just wouldn't keep me asleep. So
I think our listeners will deeply relate to that.
Absolutely.
I was like, if I drink cherry juice at 10 a.m, maybe
it's a natural
will.
Source of melatonin.
Yeah. Maybe I'll sleep.
But it can't combat the level of sunshine at 10 a.m.
Right.
Talk about, it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah. And then I was in my 20s. So I started to develop some digestive issues from being on that night shift. Like I couldn't eat. Like I would get nauseous. I remember talking to you about it actually.
Yeah. I remember that too. I would be like, okay, well, what are you eating? And you're like, ugh. Like I'll have like a bar. Yeah. And I'd
eat like a yogurt. Eat a lot of yogurt.
And then I'll have like a yogurt and.
Yeah. And then I would avoid caffeine because I was like, okay, I don't want to have coffee because that might actually take away from 15 minutes of my 5 hours of sleep or even any amount. So I'd be like groggy and weird. And then the caffeine gave me anxiety because I wasn't sleeping. And so I was not eating a lot. I was eating very minimal calories just because everything made me feel really, really sick all the time. And so I was losing a lot of weight and then I was sick all the time. It was just like a really, really bad time in my life. And
really, it sounds like kind of like a hole you couldn't get out of. You liked the job, but you're in lowest seniority and maybe there was a hiring freeze because there was a lot of other economical things going on, and maybe getting a different job wouldn't have been quite so easy.
Right.
So here you were. And I think when you're in the midst of something like that, it's hard to see, what's that saying, the forest through the trees. Like
Exactly.
the answer is right in front of you.
Yeah.
And yet it's like, well, you just can't see the solution of the answer.
Right. If I could go back in time, I would have quit, to be honest. But at the time, I was gleaning a lot of my value through service. Like, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I thought I was only as valuable as what I could bring to the table, to my career, to the world, to my friendships. So I didn't want to give that up. I'm like, well, if I quit this service-oriented job in which I gain a lot of value out of helping people, and that makes me important, it makes me feel like I am making a difference in the world, then what do I have aside from living in San Diego, which is incredibly expensive with no stable job, and not being able to like rely on anybody, because I just have one of those families that isn't like, I can't really turn to them and be like, hey, take care of me, and so I felt this immense amount of pressure to stay there and succeed. And I also have this kind of personality in which I feel like I have to, like, when things get hard, I just like buckle down and like get in it more. Like, I can endure. I'm an endurer, versus like, well, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe this isn't.
Yeah, and you also what's the right way to describe it? You're like the advocate personality type, right? Like the person that's going to step in for the weaker guy, the person
Right.
that's going to work harder so that the weaker person can have more. The person you have, I don't want to say that it's like a hero syndrome or you're always trying to like swoop in and rescue everybody, because that's not accurate. It's more that like, for you to leave a situation that's so bad and you're so needed, you would feel like you are abandoning all these people,
Right.
and that you
Exactly.
are hard, that because it's not like, especially when you know the people in your department. I say this because my husband is the same way. Like, all these
Very
people
similar.
that you're working with. Yeah. All these people you're working with. And for you to leave this department or get on a better shift, it means that like Joanna, whose husband has
Exactly.
cancer, is now on the worst shift.
Exactly.
Or that Miriam, who's pregnant, she's now the one on the worst shift. Or
Mhm.
Carl, who covered all those shifts for you when your mom was in the hospital with pneumonia, now he's the one that's put out. And you're like, man, I can't do that to these people.
Right.
And so it was like a toxic relationship where like there were good things that were keeping it, your loyalty. You're also a fiercely loyal person, and so your loyalty was really holding you in a situation that wasn't really working for you anymore. And then you have to look at the other side of it, which is the way that government and first responders pay works, pension works.
The
It's,
golden
in the
handcuffs.
military, it's similar. What was that?
They call it the golden handcuffs. It's like just good enough. And like, every year you get that tiny little incentive. You're like, well, if I eke it out for the year and a half, I'll get that extra 3 days of vacation. So, then I can, have 4 weeks of vacation, which is pretty high in the world today. But yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I think a lot of nurses, first responders, firefighters, police officers, dispatchers, they all kind of have this advocate, service-oriented personality that sort of draws them in, and then ends up being the thing that also makes them somewhat miserable in that job.
Yeah, it's like your
Yeah,
kryptonite.
because
Something that could be really
there's
good
so
for you is
much.
also what makes you your weakest, kind of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's so often the case in life too, that our greatest strength is often our greatest weakness. And
Yeah,
Preach.
I like to say that your greatest weakness is in the shadow of your greatest strength.
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
I learned that from someone else.
So
What
you
was her name? I
mentioned,
can't remember her name.
so
I would
you
quote her.
mentioned like you had a very visceral response to this kind of overnight shift. Where were you at in like your relationships in life at that point? Were you dating? Were you single? Were you married? Were you?
I was actually engaged at the time. I was engaged, and that relationship did not work out.
Mhm.
There's a lot of reasons for that. One was that my partner at the time did not understand my desire to stay in that career, which looking back on, I understand why he felt that way. At the time, I thought, why are you trying to control me?
Mm-hmm.
And also, again, the pressure of finances. Like, I think, not to be too gender role specific here, but a lot of women are attracted to men who can provide for a reason. And he was not providing. I was the provider. That job was the provision for our relationship. And so I was like, you want me to quit this job? Then where's the stability? Where's the certainty in life, let alone the relationship? And so I felt like that demand was pretty unnecessary and ridiculous when they weren't upholding that half of the relationship. And so we did break up when I was on the night shift in that time of my life. And that was pretty dark time for me. It was pretty lonely. But, like every hard time that you go through, like I think a lot of clarity was happening for me. And you can always turn those moments into growth opportunities, which I think is really important. So I realized like I have a really unhealthy attachment to this job. And also I think there are certain values in a relationship that I need to look for, and I wasn't getting in that previous relationship. So it worked out for the best in the end.
It did. Well, at least for you, it did.
Yeah, it did for me.
I doubt he's ever going to listen to this show, so
Hope
we won't
not.
name his name, but it wasn't a good match. I
No.
was there I had moved away by the time that the relationship had dissolved, but I was living there when you guys were together. You guys were together a long time. I had moved away at that point when you guys then split up, and it was very hard.
Yeah.
And then years later, I had a engagement. Or no, it wasn't even years later. It was pretty close to each
It
other,
wasn't
wasn't
at
it?
the same time. Yeah. I
Oh
remember
my
because
gosh, that's right.
I
Yours
remember
was
being like, oh, Sophie's getting married and I'm breaking up. But then you broke up on your engagement like a year later. I was like, all right, we're all in the same boat. We were actually sitting in the living room one time and we were hanging out with one of your friends and he was like, oh yeah, I had a failed engagement. And we were like, the failed engagement club.
Oh yeah, no, we weren't in a living room. We were at Urban Solace.
Yeah. We all
Yeah, there
cheersed each
was
other. And that was the
yeah.
first time in my life where I felt like I wasn't a pariah. Like, whenever you fail at something, you
Oh my
never want to like
gosh.
talk about it. And like,
And
it's more
therein is a
common than you
big part
think.
of Sarah's personality, this whole like labeling things very staunchly with like failures and like failing at this and failing with that. And I think that was a big piece of why you stayed at the police department for a long time, because
Yes,
you
absolutely.
wanted to be, and I think listeners, we relate to this so much. Like we all are somehow think we're going to like be someone different, or that we can be someone different, that we're going to be the kind of person that can blank. Like if Sarah just tried hard enough and got enough therapy and did the right things, drank enough cherry juice, she would be the quote kind of person who can thrive in this environment.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's just not true. And
Uh-huh.
Caitlin, she sees this with PCOS all the time. They want to be the kind of person who can just stay up late and eat cake for breakfast and not have it impact them. And I'm the kind of person, I want to be the kind of person who can just drink coffee all day and like not feel like shit by the time lunch rolls around. We all have this sort of fantasy, and I think everyone listening to this podcast, Caitlin and I and Sarah included, we have the fantasy that we're going to be the quote kind of person who just goes on vacation, has a bunch of hot sex, and like gets pregnant miraculously and never has to have a thought for their fertility journey or a pregnancy loss or anything of the sort. And it's not who we are. Listeners, it's not who you are. You are who you are. You're not going to morph into a different person just because you change some habits. Your body can change, your fertility can change, but you're going to still be you. And so that means like if you stop doing these things, you're going to go back the other way. Just like there's no cure for PCOS, it can be absolutely brilliantly managed with diet and lifestyle and supplements and rest and all of those things. But if you stop doing those things, the symptoms are going to return. That's just how it works. You're not going to cure it. And Sarah, you wanted to be the kind of person who could thrive in that environment. And it just isn't true. And honestly, I don't know that anyone can.
I think there are people who can. There are people who can, and they do very well in that career. And I admire some of my coworkers greatly and some of the people who, just like a relationship, that partner wasn't for me. That was not a good match for me. But there is somebody out there for that person that is a perfect match. And I think it's the same in a career. For me, it was a toxic relationship. For others, that kind of stability and that environment is what they want. It's really hard either way, but it can be very good. Like there was a lot of benefits, like flexibility was a thing. Like I took a lot of vacation. I could work 45 extra hours of overtime in a week and then take a week off. And who else can do that? We're so bound by these 9-to-5 jobs where you have to schedule your vacation and you're out and it's always at Christmas. But I could take a month off if I just worked hard enough in January,
It's kind of amazing.
So yeah.
Taking a role, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a career that is really like in your heart and in your brain and in your body, even viscerally, like you feel it's at cross purposes with where you want to be. I think all of us get to a point where it's like, I have to make a hard decision. I have to make a hard decision here. And sometimes it takes a while to do the thing that you need to do. Sometimes it's not available to do right away. Like there are real life considerations like paying rent as a 20-year-old. You can't just like quit a job and expect unemployment. That doesn't work, So there are real life considerations, and maybe that thing that is in the way of your fertility, or is in the way of creating more intimacy in your marriage, or is in the way of getting financial security, or any of these other areas of life. You also don't just like tell it to get out of here. That you have to be logical in your steps forward. And before we talk about anything else, let's take a break and hear from one of our sponsors.
We're taking a quick break from this episode to talk about one of our sponsors, the Prenatal Nutrition Library.
We love the Prenatal Nutrition Library. It's a searchable database and app, which means you have answers within seconds and peace of mind that what you're eating during pregnancy is both safe and nutritious.
It's almost like having your own personal pregnancy dietitian in your back pocket that's going to not only tell you, is it safe to eat this? How much of that should I have? Yada, yada, yada. But give you actual meal plans so you know how to put it all together onto your plate today. And the meal plans are trimester specific, meaning, some women are kind of nauseous in their first trimester and maybe they need specific foods to help combat that. Prenatal Nutrition Library has got you covered. Or the fact that your baby's brain is growing rapidly in your third trimester and you need your nutrition to support that. Prenatal Nutrition Library meal plans has got you covered there too.
This is evidence-based information. Registered dietitians are in this app weekly answering members' questions. There's an exclusive podcast within the app that's run by Ryan, who is the prenatal dietitian that founded this entire thing. It's a wealth of knowledge and resources and will take you far beyond that one-page handout your doctor handed you that actually probably has out-of-date information about eating in pregnancy.
So head on over to the Prenatal Nutrition Library as soon as you get your big fat positive. Well, okay, first message me and Caitlin so we can do a happy dance with you. Then head over to the Prenatal Nutrition Library to get clear strategies to meet your nutrient needs, as well as to take the stress out of confirming what's safe and most optimal for you and your baby while you're pregnant. Use code FFF20 for 20% off. All right, we're back. So Sarah, with all of that said, you did eventually make the decision to leave that department, or leave the police department in its entirety. Can you talk about sort of what led up to that decision and how you ultimately were able to decide to do something else?
Yeah. So while I was kind of miserable, kind of happy in my job, I got an opportunity to kind of switch focus in my careers, and I was put on a project where I was building the computer dispatch system, the software system that we were going to be using. So we had a super antiquated system, like think that like worm game that like you would play like in
Centipede.
Like where you eat the numbers,
Mm-hmm.
That was basically the level our computer system was on. Like it had dots where like the typing would go. And So we needed an upgrade bad. So I got put on that project and I freaking loved it. I loved problem solving and software development and being on a team, not in a stressful environment. And I really thrived. So they kept me on that project for a couple years, and I realized that this had been my only career. So for the first time in my life, I realized like, oh, I could do something that I like really love and I'm actually really good at. And we kind of end up loving what we're really good at usually in life versus the opposite. And this is a whole conversation on passion we could have, but a lot of people think they need to find their passion and then develop the skills. But a lot of the time you develop a skill and that develops your passion. And that's kind of what happened to me. So I started doing work on my values and evaluating what part of my values specifically in career that I had. And when I did some elicitation and I did some like deep work, I hired like a professional career coach. I went to like a bunch of classes. I studied some like unconscious mind stuff, and I was just doing work on myself. What makes me happy, what doesn't. And I found that my two greatest values in life in this situation of career were freedom and service. And they were conflicting in my job because I was helping people, but I had absolutely zero freedom to see my family, have a relationship, eat healthy, like take care of myself, like do what I wanted to do. Even when I was at work, you'd be interrupted every 5 minutes by somebody else's problem. And so I was having this conflict. And when I like down on the list was like problem solving. And so when I got into software development and building this CAD system, I got to serve and I got to have a more stable schedule to take care of myself and have freedom and flexibility. And I got to problem solve and I was just really thriving. So I thought to myself, man, I really need to like find a career that actually has all these things. At that point, I was a supervisor, and being a supervisor, I also realized my love of teaching, which I really, really love to mentor and teach. So that was also fulfilling. But when 2020 came around, it was a really tough time in law enforcement. We were heralded as heroes for, a certain amount of time. Like my lunch was paid for about a month by restaurants and people and civilians who just wanted to donate to the police department. And everybody called and said, thank you for your sacrifice. You're, doing all this stuff. And it felt really rewarding. Of course, nothing really changed for me. Like everybody has this big pandemic moment, but I just kept going to work because we obviously had to go to work. And so it wasn't as impactful. And then we had a lot of political turmoil with Black Lives Matter and protests and anti-police kind of rhetoric stuff happening. And so all those people who were like, thank you for your sacrifice, suddenly were like, we hate you. Why are you serving this evil, corrupt organization? And the whiplash of that was like really hard. And especially for somebody who gleaned some of their value by service, to just be kind of hated. And then, I was like, and my people that I love to be hated as well. And that was really tough. And so the other thing was government is, if anybody who's ever worked in government knows that like change happens really slow, really slow.
Oh yeah.
As I had been getting into this tech world, I realized like failure is good, because if you fail fast, then you learn fast. And, innovation and iteration is good. As in, try something, and then when it fails, make it a better, and then when it fails, make it better, and then eventually you reach your goal. Versus like
fail forward fast. That's what Louis likes to say. If you're gonna fail, accelerate to the point of failure so that you can get back up and move forward.
So I started to have these mind shifts, and I started to bring them to the organization. Like, hey, we should do this, we should do this, and none of my ideas were really appreciated. My philosophy on change and organization and leadership was not really appreciated, and so in 2021, I had some conflict with some coworkers, and I was like, you know what? I don't need this job. And I also had some health issues with fertility where I couldn't get pregnant, and was having major relationship issues with the shift work. My husband and I, he was in law enforcement, I was in law enforcement, and we would see each other like one day a week, maybe. Like he would work the day shift and I would work the night shift, and we'd like have a half hour at home together where we'd see each other, and then we'd switch off to our different jobs. Then we'd have like one day a week where we had the day off together, and it wasn't
Yeah, and you
working.
both were like sacrificing sleep to try to
Yeah.
be with the other person,
Yeah.
and
And
even then it's like you're doing that, you're with this other person, but all the issues are like just what it takes to have a marriage or even just live with another person. It's like you don't want to make the short time you have together be about the fact that he like keeps leaving his dirty lunch pail like to rot in the sun on the porch. But like, so you just keep cleaning it or moving it and cleaning it and moving it, and like the resentment is building within you for that. And then, oh my gosh, it's like you're trying to have an entire relationship in a few short hours, and it just ends up being just horrible. I remember that time for you guys.
yeah. And I would say it's a lot like a long distance relationship. It's an unrealistic perspective of what it takes to be in a relationship. So we were together, for however many years before I ever quit. And, that one day a week, we would be like, let's go all out, like dinner and like, fun and like go do something. And so we never had like those marriage moments where you're just sitting in two separate rooms working, or you're on the couch, not talking, just being together or anything. Like, I didn't know what that was like, because
Mm-hmm.
every moment we had together had to be prioritized and special and made to be this thing. So there was also that like high, like you get, like
Mm-hmm.
every weekend is a vacation. So, a lot of ups and downs there. And then my mom also got cancer. And so when I went to the department and I said, hey, I'm going to have to take some time off, they were really unsupportive. Obviously, there's some government regulations that they can't do anything about if I get FMLA, but they were not willing to really help me until I got those government regulations and like covered time off in place. And then I got COVID. I got long COVID, and I was out for like a month. And I had some conflict.
Gee, I can't imagine why you were impacted so greatly. Your lifestyle was so healthy.
Yeah, right. And so when I got really sick, I started to realize like that place will survive without me, and that service that I'm so valuable here, like mentality sort of shifted, and I was like, actually, they don't really need me.
You are valuable, but you
Right.
were not valued. That's what I was saying before we hit record. It's like she was incredibly valuable, but nobody was seeing it, or because they were all trying to put out the fire at their feet
Right.
too.
Yeah. So in November of 2021, I was like, what am I going to sacrifice? Like, I also had my side business, my Whisky Nomad business that was starting to pick up. I needed to travel. I wanted to grow it. And I was like, do I sacrifice my hobby, my like side hustle, my relationship, my family, my health? Like what one of those things am I going to give up to make this career work? And none of them were the priority. So I went into my boss's office and I was like, I will be gone in a month. And that was after 13 years. And I was poised to promote and I was doing really well in the job. And it just, I don't know. I was like, this is not for me. And the realization was great. Like I just felt so relieved. And so I did what I had to do to tie up all of my time off and pay and work. And then I left very quietly. There was no like big party. There was no like any pomp and circumstance around it. I just didn't show up to work one day. And that was really weird because I think I slept like probably for like a week. Like I think all of that adrenaline and everything and the stress of years of that work, and all I did was sleep for about a week. And then when I woke up about a week later, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with my life now that I feel like a human again a little bit? And Sophie came over with a bottle of really nice champagne and we
Yeah,
celebrated.
her last shift.
Yeah.
Okay, I bought a fancy bottle of champagne,
Yeah. That was like,
and we
that was
drank the whole thing. That
um,
was so fun.
it was fun. And I think that moment was like, champagne is for celebrations, right? And, to get into an alcohol conversation, alcohol can emphasize those moments by providing that kind of like symbolism. And so champagne was perfect. It was like, we weren't mourning the loss of anything. We were celebrating this new adventure, and we had champagne and that was it.
And for me, I mean, here I'm sitting here for those 13 years with you, watching this all unfold and being like, quit your fucking job. Like, this
No.
job is eating you alive.
Yeah.
These people are cannibals. Like the people calling 911, like not that, if you've ever called 911, it's not that you're a cannibal, but in that state, you're like a cat trying to claw their way out of a bathtub. You're in a severe survival situation. And imagine just nothing but that all the time for 13 years. It was just not good at all for, especially like Sarah's husband working in this same field for a while. He is better at like compartmentalizing. He is better at sort of separating himself. He can do different than she can. Sarah's part really she's like Caitlin and I. Like she comes home and is really concerned about the people that she worked with that day. Just like when you tell Caitlin or I that the test was negative, or they found abnormal tissue, or that you lost a pregnancy, we cry with you and we carry that home like that. We are empathic people, and Sarah just could not, it was just not good. And so for me, seeing her all these years doing this and then finally quitting, I was so proud of her, because it was not only like, thank God you're not going to be like drowning at this job anymore, but it just marked so much personal growth and so much personal triumph that like she could let go of this thought that she had failed, because she wasn't going to retire after 20 years or whatever, and stepping away, prioritizing her own health, her own life, her own marriage, to go and thrive and excel and serve and give in a different capacity, to do something different. For me, it was a celebration. I was so proud of you for doing that. I'm still so proud of you for doing that. And that's a big reason why I wanted to have you on the show to talk about this, because we have a lot of listeners that are in, whether they're ER nurses, whether they're school teachers, whether they are working on Wall Street, whether they're working in hospitality, whether they are first responders in the military. Like we've got listeners in similar situations where it feels like you can't possibly quit your job. It can't possibly leave, even though it's eating you alive.
Right.
And I wanted them to sort of see the thought process going into it. So we talked about how it was very relieving for you. For our listeners who maybe are facing a decision like this for the sake of their fertility, what else was mixed into that? Because it couldn't have just been relief. Like, were there some conflicting feelings as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really scary. There was a loss of identity.
Mm-hmm.
We always, as humans, have to identify ourselves with something. And it's a kind of a natural thing to do. The way our brains work is we self-identify in a certain, like we group things together. We self-identify other people in groups as well. And so the thing about like law enforcement and certain careers is that you self-identify as that. Like, I am a police officer. I am a dispatcher. This is my identity. And so you get a lot of things from that identity, I get out of tickets. I don't know. Like I have,
you've got your finger on the pulse of the city, and you know who's doing what and where. Yeah.
I know what's happening. And there's a lot of like just things that make you part of that community, where you see cops on the street and you're like, oh, hey, I'm a part of you. I'm a part of your family. And I know what's happening and I know what you're going through. And when you exit that family, it's like you cut off those unhealthy ties. You can feel very lost, which is why I think it's really important to identify values versus like the job, the identity of like understanding what my values were, of like freedom and the service. And these are the things that make me who I am, not the job that kind of allowed me to have those things. And so then, I transitioned into becoming a whiskey influencer, which is a completely different trajectory. And I really had hesitated to do that because I felt like I was lacking that service part of life. And I was like not fully satisfied. I'm like, I don't want to just, I know this sounds weird, but I don't want to just travel the world drinking alcohol and going to parties. Like maybe that would be fun if I was 22, but now I'm in my 30s. Like I want to have more purpose in life.
Our listeners completely identify with that. They totally identify with that. And it's a weird change to make. And so I think that's a good place to take our break here, and then start talking about moving into this second part of your health, your career, or your fertility journey. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, we're taking a break from our episode, and I want to talk about something that's super confusing. When you head down the supplement aisle and you're looking for a prenatal, and on the prenatal bottle itself, it says, do not take if you're trying to conceive, pregnant, or breastfeeding. Like, what the heck?
Yeah, it says, talk to your doctor if you are pregnant, could be pregnant, breastfeeding, postpartum, whatever. And every supplement has this. You go down the supplement aisle, you go shopping on whatever supplement website, and there's a disclaimer on every bottle of every single thing, which means that everything that you've been taking your whole life long is now a big question mark about whether or not you are potentially harming yourself by taking something where you're trying to be healthy. So that is why we partnered with Needed. Needed is a perinatal nutrition supplement brand that has a wide array of products specifically designed for women who are pregnant, trying to become pregnant, breastfeeding, or postpartum. So it's not just that these products like can work if you're in that situation, or, oh, it's probably okay if you take it while you're trying to conceive. No. These products are researched, they are formulated, and they are put together specifically for women who are trying to conceive, pregnant, breastfeeding, and postpartum.
This answers so many questions. I always get asked, like, what can I take? It's cold and flu season. What's safe? Needed has an immune support. That's safe whether you're trying to conceive, pregnant. It's even safe for your little ones.
And it's not just immune support. They've got collagen, they've got hydration support, they have digestive support, they have prenatal multi. They even made a line for dudes.
Needed is somebody we're really proud to be partnering with. So head over to their website and use code FFF20 for 20% off your order.
Now we are back. And so Sarah made this big transition where she moved her career, a big piece of her identity. And what we were talking about during the break just now was, what do you want your life to look like when you're old? What do you want your mark on the world to be? And Caitlin and I were talking about this at our podcast retreat. We were both talking about, do we want to face this whole trying to conceive thing again? Does she and I, because Caitlin has 3 children, I have 2 children. They're healthy, they're wonderful, like it's everything we could want. And when you start thinking about growing your family, especially if you struggle to conceive at any point, to go step back into trying to conceive is kind of like, like facing a lot of those things that you maybe don't want to face, a lot of kind of scary things, a lot of unknown, and then the whole like, let's say it works. And then you have to go through pregnancy and birth and postpartum and breastfeeding and newborn stage. And, and then you have your whole life taking care of this kid. It's like, it's a lot to kind of face and look at. But when it comes down to it, like what Caitlin and I both are like, dude, what else is there? The most fulfilling thing in my life is my time with my children. And that's saying a hell of a lot, because I absolutely love my work and I love you, listener. I love working with you. I love helping you. This is just a huge piece of my life's calling, and I feel so alive in doing it. But I would let that go for the sake of motherhood if I had to. So that's even, an even higher value for me. So what else is there, And so are you gonna regret this working on this project for San Diego Police Department that somebody else gets voted in as the new sheriff or whatever, and he just is like, oh, we're not doing that anymore, we're doing this now, and you're like, cool, just threw it all away. Are you gonna regret tasting cocktails in the Maldives? So Sarah sort of made she made that pivot, she made a different choice. So that's the point of Sarah's story that we're at right now. So here we are. You've left the police department. You moved into something else.
I think what you're talking about is a key thing for people who are kind of experiencing this, and something that I had to learn, which was the difference between like different types of motivation. We pretty much as humans only have two types of motivation. It's either towards something, like towards pleasure, or away from pain. And so you can shift your way of thinking about life by you like understanding the language you're using. If you're saying, I don't want to blank, then that's an away from, that's an avoidance of pain. But if you say, I want to blank, that's a towards pleasure. And you can understand a more full like life and your own limiting beliefs about your abilities and what your life can offer you by recognizing what things you're just doing because you're avoiding pain and what things you're doing because you're actually going and working and striving and maybe even failing towards the life that you actually want. And I
That
think
is such a mouthful, and it really resonates when you're trying to conceive, because it's like, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want to avoid the pain of loneliness as a elderly person? Are you doing this because you feel like the weirdo who doesn't have a kid? Are you doing this because you want to sort of check this box off in your life? Are you doing this because you have like a God-given calling to mothering? Are you doing this because this is your heart's desire? And that's where I see more of like, those are the people that I love working with, where it's their heart's desire. And those are the people that I see being like, yeah, I was next in line to be the CEO of whatever the heck, but I had to travel for 35 weeks out of the year. I couldn't do this, that, or the other thing. And it just wasn't, I wanted to have a baby because I want to be a mom. And that's my heart's cry. And so now I work part-time managing a grocery store.
right.
And there's zero stress, and I am home every night, and I love it. And now I can grow my family.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, understanding your own values in life and what you really do value in your family life, in your career life, in your relationship can help you to recognize what you're doing and what those things are that are away from and what are towards. What are you doing in your life that's just avoiding that pain? And is that just a limiting factor on your life? Like you're avoiding the fear of not having money, so you're staying in a job that you hate, versus thinking about how you could have a life that is completely abundant and make a lot of money and then going towards that goal. And, absolutely right with the family as well.
How did that play out for you? I mean, obviously there were things you needed to see change in your career. How did that switch impact your relationships, your desire to grow a family, what work you were moving towards?
I think the biggest thing for me was the definiteness of purpose that I developed because, one, I put myself in a situation in which I had no choice but to succeed in an area that was not the police department. It had always been this safety thing to me, this stable job that was never going to change, never going to be better, never going to be worse, just was there. And when I took away that element of certainty, then I realized the growth that could happen and that opportunities abounded in my life the second that I quit. And I'm grateful to God for that. For example, the thing that I loved most about my job was that time building the software system and doing the CAD work, and not being able to do that towards my last years in the career was really hard. And it was something I didn't want to give up at all. And 2 months after quitting the police department, I was approached by another agency that said, hey, we like you, a fully background checked, CLET certified ex-dispatch supervisor who spent years consulting on a $10 million project, to be a consultant on our software development. And so I became a part-time consultant for another agency doing just the software, the only stuff that I loved, for 3 times more money that I was getting paid as a supervisor. If I hadn't been willing to risk, invite, and think of my life as having more prosperity, I never would have opened myself up to that opportunity. So then I was able to be okay financially because I could work in this job in which I worked 2 days a week instead of 80 hours a week and make enough money to pay my bills.
Right.
Yeah.
So here you are now in your fertility journey, trying to conceive, working in an industry that is also not conducive to fertility, whiskey and spirit. So for followers, Sarah's handle is Whisky Nomad, whiskey without an E, Whisky Nomad. And she's on our Instagram. You can go from there and just tap it if you want, and it'll be in the show notes. But So she now runs this Instagram and TikTok account and goes all around the world, all around the country, all around the city, working in whiskey and spirits, which if you're trying to conceive, that's like, what? So why don't you sort of tell us about your life doing that? And then we can also talk about how other people who are in nightlife, entertainment, whiskey, food and drink, hospitality, how they can still support their desire to grow their family while working in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very fortunate because my love for teaching translates into this industry. Like, I focus on teaching people about whiskey versus drinking the whiskey. And that is my way of being involved in everything I love about the bar industry, the nightlife, the parties, the people, the learning of like all these different nuances about spirits and cocktails. And I get to teach about it. And to teach about it means I can like sip the whiskey, but I don't have to drink 10 cocktails a night. And the balance is key. So if your life's mission is drinking 10 cocktails a night, like I'm sure there's a way that's probably like unhealthy for one, but you could
I will think that we're probably out of that.
I'm like trying not to be too judgmental if like, you
judge someone that's
great.
drinking 10 cocktails a night while trying to get pregnant. I think that's maybe a place. Maybe not judge them.
We need to like, help you realign your priorities a little bit.
And maybe you should go to some meetings.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like identifying what your real priorities are and then being congruent with yourself. I'm very solidly congruent with who I am as a person. So I can go to a whiskey event at this point in my life where everybody's drinking the finest scotch that you can possibly get your hands on. And I can say, oh, no, I don't want a glass of that. I'll have like a tiny sip to try it for the experience. And then I'll go drink a soda water and bitters, which is my favorite thing to drink in the bar. And I'll just have non-alcoholic alternatives and I'll hang out there and I'll talk about the whiskey and I'll educate and I'll learn. And I won't be sucked into this peer pressure, essentially, that you have to drink to have fun. And that mentality shift, it comes from being in a place of solidly knowing who you are and what you're about. And so if somebody is struggling with that, I'd say do some work on yourself and see like what you're really about and what you really want. Is having a family that big a deal? Well, then be congruent to that. Don't allow other people to define your expectations of you. And then you can show up in any situation, bar industry or otherwise, and be exactly who you are and find your way.
We're taking a break to talk about our sponsor, Fertility Cloud. In working with hundreds of you ladies, we have noticed a problem that has come up. I know it's come up for me, Caitlin. It's come up for your clients as well. And that is not only finding a doctor who is going to know how to help you, but one that wants to. We have a lot of issues here, and sometimes getting a simple blood test or actually getting a medication or talking to someone who's actually an expert in fertility can not only take an insane amount of time, but it can feel like you're fighting your doctor.
Yeah, or you're playing like Russian roulette to get in front of somebody who actually cares. We are so excited to be partnering with Fertility Cloud because they have a solution for all of these frustrations. Just last week, I had a client that needed right now care, and we couldn't get her in front of an OB. And she got a same-day appointment with Fertility Cloud and spoke to a reproductive endocrinologist and had a prescription that she needed in her hand hours later. This is a solution that our industry desperately needs, and we are so excited to present to you.
So if you're in a remote area and you have to drive 4 hours to go see a doctor, or if you've been to multiple doctors and none of them seem to really listen or really care or want to take an approach that works for you, start up with My Fertility Cloud.
My Fertility Cloud has provided us a link, so check it out in the show notes. That will get you $25 off your first visit with one of their providers. I'm so excited to tell you that the PCOS app is sponsoring this podcast episode. The PCOS app is a one-stop shop for all things PCOS. It's also your meal guide and inspo all in one. If you love listening to me on this podcast and you feel like, hey, I want Caitlin to be in my ear every day encouraging me about how to manage my PCOS, then you have to go download the PCOS app. We have curated articles to answer questions that you have about PCOS. There are short snippets in the PCOS Answers podcast exclusive to the PCOS app. We also have recipes where I not only give you the recipe, but teach you within the recipe itself what I have done to make it more blood sugar and hormone supporting so that you can take your own recipes and make them more PCOS friendly. If you've been looking for the Google of all things PCOS, with the filter of compassion and expertise that you get from Caitlin Johnson, RD, then you have found it in the PCOS app. Head to your Android or Apple store today, download it, and let's hang out.
All right, so here we are back again. Why don't you sort of talk about, I want to hear about your transition from being the girl who's having cocktails to now I'm trying to conceive, so I'm not really.
Sure.
And then sort of how you handled that. Because I think it's maybe a little bit easier for you in some ways because you're not like at the same bar with the same people doing the same thing day after day after day. There's like a little more variety of people. And so you can come into a new crowd and be the girl that drinks soda water and bitters. And they're not like, whoa, what's the big change? What are you, pregnant? You know, and then you have to kind of like deal with that question. But also, how do you deal with that question? So can you kind of talk about going just, I don't know, your journey through this part of your career?
Sure. Well, I mean, full transparency, like I have had a miscarriage in the past. And when I was pregnant, I showed up to my regular Wednesday night whiskey tasting that I go to every Wednesday and ordered a soda water. And the bartender looked at me like, oh, is there a reason for that soda water? And I was just like, yeah, there is. I'm pregnant. I was just honest. And I think everybody's journey with that can be their own if you want to be private about it, if you don't. But that person was a friend of mine, like a close enough friend that I was like, all right, I want all the support I can get if this goes badly.
Yeah, if a random bartender at a place you've like never been says that to you, that's where you're like,
that's different. But they're not
what the hell, bro?
Because a random bartender that doesn't know you is not going to know that you normally get the whiskey and now you're ordering soda water. This person I've known for 11 years at the same bar that I have been studying whiskey at for 11 years. So they've seen me through this journey. And I wouldn't call them up and tell them I had a miscarriage. But for me, at the time, my mentality was like, okay, I want to invite Sophie. I want to invite my sister-in-law. I want to invite people in to this experience of being pregnant in case it goes badly. And when I was confronted with that question, I just thought to myself, I could lie about this and hold it all in, and I could do that. Or I could just be like, yeah, I am. And you can celebrate with me now, and you can mourn with me if it goes badly, which it did go badly. And they did. They were very sad for me. And I felt like I had a community in my community that cared about what was going on with me. And I personally, and I'm not telling anybody to do this, felt like that was a better way to process the grief than to be at home alone with nobody knowing what I was going through completely. And I was able to go back, a month later to that whiskey tasting and be like, yeah, I'll have the whiskey, please. And they just gave me a hug and didn't say anything. And, I was able to drink the whiskey. And then I felt like that was part of that process. And I don't regret sharing my news with somebody that, even if they only cared about me a fraction of what my sister-in-law did, still was part of that journey, because this is my community. The whiskey community is my community. So no, not strangers on the street, but I think that grieving process can be helped sometimes by sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us now and today. So we're so sorry that you didn't get to meet your baby. And moving forward, what sort of tips, tricks do you have of how to enjoy life while drinking less or not drinking at all, while you're still in these circles? I mean, we heard about the soda water and bitters. What else you got for us?
Oh my gosh, I have so much to say on this topic. I wish we had an entire episode just on cocktails alone. But I will say that when you drink alcohol, you're drinking more, you're experiencing more than just a taste, right? And you are immersed in an environment like a tiki bar, for example, takes you on vacation. And then the aroma of pineapple and mint reminds you of those tropical experiences you might have actually had in a tropical vacation. And the alcohol sort of reminiscent, like you ever had a bad experience with like tequila and then you can't smell it ever again? Like visceral reaction.
Well, mine was with whiskey, actually.
Yes. I think whiskey and tequila are the biggest culprits of this. I don't know a lot of people who are like,
Mine was Diet Coke. Yeah. But I know what you're talking about. But I was using Diet Coke as a mixer, first of all.
Gross.
Like, what are you, 18 years old? But it was rum and Diet Coke. You know what? I don't really drink a lot of rum drinks, but that was like the beginning of my absolute hatred for artificial sweeteners.
Yes.
Was that same thing.
Yeah, so you can have these bad experiences, they imprint something survivalist on our brains that say, okay, this was a bad experience, avoid at all costs, right? But we also have that same sensory experience in a positive way in our brains as well. And we get like a cortisol, like the stress hormone, or we get like the endorphin, the happiness, and it can imprint. And there's a reason for that. And the thing I always bring up when I educate people on this is actually like, what's your most positive memory as a kid? It's most likely related to some sort of sweet thing that you ate. So it's like summer barbecues because you had watermelon and ice cream, or it's the late night after movie ice cream that you got with your family, or it's that cotton candy you got at the fair and
Christmas cookie. Yeah.
Christmas cookie. Yeah. These sweet elements, sugar itself, like really enforces that positive like brain chemistry and imprints those memories, and cocktails can do the same. So when you recognize that and you're pregnant, you may say, okay, I'll never be able to experience that without alcohol. But the truth is that you can, if you understand what cocktails are doing for you with environment and with flavor and with memory association and sensory experiences. So you can actually have a super high-end cocktail experience. You don't need the booze to do it. And that is a really cool way to set yourself free from feeling like you have to drink alcohol to begin with, let alone, understanding fertility. So the origin of the cocktail is medicinal, and that can also help you break free of any expectations of what a cocktail is today. Cocktails originally were basically bittered elements, herbal elements that made you feel good, like digestive aids or headaches, etc., that just tasted really terrible. So they added sugar and maybe water or something or spices to make it palatable. And that's where like chartreuse, for example, is it was made by monks back in like the 16th century as a medicinal liqueur to help with health. And so you can start thinking about cocktails as maybe a health tonic for yourself. That's also a sensory experience. And when you get into that realm in the fertility, like it can be really fun. Like, okay, what do I need? I need ginger. I need mint. I'm feeling nauseous. I want to relax, whatever it might be. And you can say, how can I create the cocktail experience with ginger?
How can we make this Sarah's cherry juice experiences have very much informed.
Yes. I mean, but that's a good one, right? Because like one of the recipes that I've seen for cherries is like essentially a cherry old fashioned with no whiskey in it, where they smoke the cherry juice, because cherry and bourbon have very similar chemical components actually. And so you can pull out
really delicious. I want that one.
I can send you the recipe. But yeah, I mean, like imagine like a non-alcoholic smoked, then you want to like smoke it because you're used to your smoked old fashioned. I drink really expensive whiskey or cocktails. So for me, it's like this bourbon cherry component, this tart cherry juice. And then what, if you really want a high end, buy like a tiny wooden barrel, and why don't you barrel aged your simple syrup? That way you get wood notes that you wouldn't have gotten, it doesn't have to be whiskey interacting with wood. It can be sugar interacting with wood. Now you have a wood flavored simple syrup with a base cherry juice, and then you smoke it, and you can really create something that
has a lot of depth,
the olfactory senses, and brings back some of those familiar chemical components, essentially, that remind you of that first old fashioned you ever had. Now, is it going to taste the same? No, it's never going to taste the same, but there are definitely things that you can do to have that experience.
It doesn't need to taste the same. We're looking for,
right.
Yeah, that's a big piece of your fertility journey, just in the nutshell right there, is that we're moving forward. Okay. We can't be constantly looking into the past and recreating everything. We need to be moving forward. How do we move into this new space without trying to just make everything be the same?
One of my biggest complaints from people who do non-alcoholic drinks is that it doesn't have the heat of ethanol, of alcohol.
Oh yeah, that like warm burn as you swallow.
And you sort of miss that sort of burning sensation. And so, you know, when you understand where that burning sensation is, you can maybe recreate it as well. So ethanol is actually affecting your pain receptors. It has the same effect on your brain as a hot chili pepper. And your brain doesn't really understand what's happening to your palate. So it just translates it to heat, even though it's not technically hot in any way, shape, or form, just like a pepper. And so that capsaicin, I think is how you say that word.
Capsaicin, yeah.
Capsaicin. You know, that capsaicin element, you can adjust to the amount of peppers that you want to eat, just like you can adjust to how high proof alcohol you want to be. So ginger has the same effect on your palate. So if you miss the heat of ethanol in your cocktails, like I would always recommend trying like a spicy ginger cocktail or using ginger in your cocktail to sort of get that familiar burn sort of back. Or if you can tolerate a pepper while you're pregnant, then, you know, doing a pepper. So you get some heat. And so things like that can sort of be adjusted so you have that experience. And then my number one tip for non-alcoholic cocktails is to focus on the smell. So I recently was given a bottle by a brand called Sunday's Finest Old Fashions, and they were like, it's a beautiful bottle of a pre-batched old fashioned, and they decided they were going to make the best possible old fashioned that you can make. So they sourced their oranges from Spain, and they got the vanilla from Madagascar, and it's like all super, super high quality ingredients. And when they did all of this research into building the best possible old fashioned they could make, they discovered it always fell flat when compared to a cocktail at a bar. And they asked themselves why this was happening, and they found that it was because of the aroma. When you go to a bar, they always spritz that orange peel on top so you get oil effervescence, or they slap the mint and they put it on there, and you get that mint flavor in your nose, and you smell those fresh ingredients. And when you have a canned cocktail,
that is so true. Because I can tell, like, these canned cocktails are so popular now. I've tried a couple of them. And what do you do first? You smell it. And immediately I'm like, this is going to taste like shit.
Yeah,
like, there's no way this is going to suck.
So the best way to elevate your non-alcoholic cocktail is to focus on the nose. Like, put mint in there, put orange zest in there, get aromatized something or other, and really emphasize those smells. Burn some sage. I don't know. Do whatever you want to do to really smoke it. Do
get
something
a fresh lime. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And like rim your glass with that lime, like spritz it out there. Make sure that you can smell the citrus. And that will really, really elevate the fact that most cocktails do kind of fall flat.
All right. Well, Sarah, I think that's pretty much all of our questions about this part of it. I mean, we could definitely have you back we got to do something more like visual for when we have you back. We'll do like a YouTube special where we're like making the drink standing there with you and people can like see what we're doing. Because hearing someone tell you, like, you would never listen to a cooking podcast, like, and now I'm cutting a carrot, you know, like you want to see it happening.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, you have really given our listeners a gift, and me as well, because I've been bugging you to come on the show, and we're very happy to have you. So thank you so much for sharing a big piece of your life story with us. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us and giving us your time. I think we're about ready for a Yeah Girl. What do you think, Caitlin?
Yeah,
I don't think we even
told
Sarah about Yeah Girls, did we? Okay, Sarah and listeners, this is the part of our show where we do what we call a Yeah Girl, because sometimes we can talk about some somber stuff on this show and some hard topics. And so we like to end each episode with a celebration. And so you will say something in your life, I will say something in my life that I am celebrating or that's going well or that I'm looking forward to. And then you go, yeah, girl, once I've said it. And it could be anything from I'm writing a book, I'm making huge moves in my career, to I ate the best chicken taco from this place. Like, it could be anything in between.
Sure.
I finally got my vacuum fixed, or like whatever it is that's lighting you up today. That's what we want to hear about. We want to hear your Yeah Girl. So I just talked for a long time. So Sarah or Caitlin, let's hear your Yeah Girl. We can also like pause for a minute and then you can think of it and then we can just edit it right in. But you seemed like you had one.
I have one.
Okay.
I'm building a Ultimate Whiskey Academy course. So a digital course for whiskey drinkers, so learning all about the nerdy stuff about whiskey. And I'm like
That's so
so
cool.
excited about it. I'm really excited about it. So that's coming along and I can't wait to release it.
What's your timeline looking like?
Yeah, I don't know. It's always these things always take longer than you think, but I'm shooting for end of
Oh, they
August.
sure do. Wow. Oh, God, that's really soon.
No.
Yeah,
This
you'll be done
episode
with
will
it by the
probably
time this
be out.
airs. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Okay. So followers, if you've had your baby and you are ready to learn about whiskey, or if you are married to someone who wants to learn about it, or a gift for your brother-in-law or whatever, head on over to Whiskey Nomad, because by the time this airs, I think her course is going to be out and ready.
Super
Yeah,
exciting.
girl.
Yeah, girl. I'll give that a yeah, girl. Okay, on the subject of alcohol, that will be my yeah, girl. My husband and I went out. We've been prioritizing date nights lately so that we can get time together alone without our children. And we're like 3 weeks running of some level of something, just he and I. And last night we went to this really cute little Italian bistro that's like in a strip mall. You wouldn't expect it to be really good. And, you know, it's the kind of place where the owner comes out and talks at every table, and just really sweet. My husband needed to listen to this episode actually, because he's kind of a novice at ordering drinks. He's like, oh, that sounds really good. But more often than not, he'll get it and be like, ooh, I don't like this. Like last night he ordered a Negroni and it came out. And he's like, well, I don't typically like Negronis, but this one has this in it and this one has this in it. And he got it and he took one sip and was like, ugh. It's like,
Yeah.
you don't like Campari. Like I could have told you that. Stop ordering drinks with Campari in it. But I just kind of want to celebrate the fact that we're prioritizing that and continuing to choose intimacy, not just sexually, but like getting to know each other now and reconnecting. And every time we've been going on a date, we each like prepare 1 or 2 questions of things that's like, I want to talk about this about us, or this about our dreams. Or last night I asked him like, hey, what's something about us that surprised you lately in a really good way? And just kind of having those
doing
conversations
questions like that with my husband. Yes.
So fun.
He hates it, but I don't care.
Oh, BJ gets into it. It's like
He eventually gets into it, but I tend to approach him at times where he's like,
gosh, yeah. I don't want to think.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm interrupting. Go.
It's okay. It was just a really sweet night last night, and he ended up getting a cocktail he liked. And I don't know.
Which one did he like?
Yeah,
What did he go for?
Inquiring minds need to know which one did he
Yeah,
get?
it was
Which one did he
like sweet limoncello Italian thing.
Yeah.
You know,
BJ likes the sweet drinks.
he likes sweet drinks, and he thinks he doesn't.
But he's also, so BJ is like, he's all a man. He's just like this big dude, college football career. Like he's a tough dude, but he's just very secure in that. And so he like quit football to join the choir, and like he'll order a drink and be like, oh yeah, I want this one here. And it's like a lemon hibiscus, whatever. And it comes like frozen in an up glass. And he's just like, this is damn delicious. And he's not like, I
drinking
can't
it with
drink
like
this,
his
it's hot
pinky.
pink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Not even. He's just going to
so
drink
true.
it normally and be like, this is good. And you're like,
Yeah.
damn, BJ, go for it.
Then we went to Top Golf, and we couldn't
This
get like.
is so fun.
It was really fun. It was very impromptu. My girls went over to my in-laws for a sleepover, and my parents live with us, Sarah. And so we put Seamus down, our youngest, to go to sleep. And we were like, great, we got like 3 hours before my bedtime. So we went to Top Golf, and they didn't have a base, so we played putt-putt, and I whooped his ass. So yeah,
Nice.
girl, to that. I always feel really good
Yeah,
if I
girl.
can do something
Caitlin's,
sporty and beat
she's
the
a
shit
scratch
out of
golfer.
him. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, so my yeah girl, I'll stay in the same vein, and I'll share something that would make my husband blush. So yesterday, my mom took my oldest to her gymnastics class, and my youngest baby was sleeping, and my husband and I he's just been under a lot of stress, and he's being treated for traumatic brain injuries and stuff, and his fuse has just been super short. And so he's he's been gone for work, but he came home just for like 24 hours because he had some medical appointments that he needed to go to. And he was just so gruff and so grouchy and just, everything the girls did was getting on his nerves and like going to like a 10 out of 10 on them for like everything, for the smallest stuff. Like our baby like pooped her pants, like pooped her diaper. Like, what do you want from her? Like, really? Oh, you have to do this right now? Like, yeah, she does have to do this right now. She's 9 months old. But so after that, my mom took our oldest. Our youngest was napping. He like came up to me and gave me a hug and a kiss and just put his hands on my shoulders and looked in my eyes. And he was like, this is not how I want to act. And like, this is not what I want to be doing. And I want, you're prioritizing things and you're doing things and you're making all the right choices. You're prioritizing all the right things and you're doing all the right things. And I'm coming in here trying to be helpful and I'm just not. And I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. And then he gave me this big kiss. And then I was like, well,
our baby's
oldest
asleep.
is at gymnastics and our baby's asleep. And my mom isn't here. My mom is visiting. And so, we came together as one in the marriage bed at about 10 a.m. or whenever that was.
He would kill you if he knew you were talking about
it. But the yeah girl comes from the fact that I didn't experience pain like I had at certain times. I've sort of had like weird stuff going on since having Jenny. And there are times when it's not painful and then times when it just randomly is. And there doesn't really seem to be any rhyme or reason to this. And the time before when he and I had tried to be intimate, there was like just an unexplained pain. It was very weird. And so this time around, that pain wasn't there. Yay. And I was able to get where I was trying to go. And so that is my yeah girl, was having some pain-free sex. And
hallelujah.
Yes. And I haven't even really been doing anything. I'm not doing like stretches or exercises or using like medicines or anything to try to get things healed. So I don't know what the story is. I actually have a doctor's appointment on Monday to be like, what the hell is happening to me? But maybe it's resolved. That's my yeah girl.
That's amazing. Yeah, girl. So, what a fun episode.
Yeah. This has been an episode of Food Freedom Fertility. We are signing out. If you liked this episode or even liked it a little bit, we would love for you to subscribe, to rate, to review. Even if you just blurt one little thing that you liked about it, the more you do that, the more it helps women who are struggling to find us online. And so the algorithms are real, y'all. That's why we do this whole bit at the end. And if you want to know more about Whisky Nomad, Instagram, TikTok, Whisky Nomad. That's the spot. Thanks
Sarah,
for listening.
You're delightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Sophia. If you love the show and want to continue your health and fertility journey using our resources, head on over to foodfreedomfertility.com for show notes, links to products and services, information about our guests, and our newsletter. Again, that's foodfreedomfertility.com. Thanks for listening.